You're listening to Partnernomics Podcast, where we discuss the art and science of developing successful strategic partnerships. To learn more about the suite of Partnernomics solutions, visit partnernomics.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Partnernomics Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Brigman, and we've got a great podcast lined up for you today. Mr. Gilad and David from Contentsquare, super cool company. I had an opportunity to meet these guys a few months back and just learn more of what their company is up to. And man, if you love growth businesses, you're going to really love hearing what these guys have to say. Not only through partnerships, but through acquisition, through organic. I mean, they're pulling out all the tools to grow their business. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they've just about doubled, or if not doubled, just in the last year. So they're really making some big waves. But Gilad, David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Mark.
Well, Gilad, if you wouldn't mind, man, I'd love for you just to kind of share a little bit about, we kind of like to start with understanding how did people jump into the business world, and then how they made their way into the partnerships track. Love to hear your story.
So I actually started my career like many people in Israel in the military, but I liked it so much I decided to stay on and double my time there. And I was an officer in the Armored Corps, a company commander. I finished that journey and went on to business school, law school, became a lawyer, and kind of got tired watching the business go from the sidelines and wanted to jump in. This is how I got into business. I actually joined ClickTail just over 6 years ago. I had to have someone push me through the door, but once I was in, I knew I liked what I was doing. To partnerships, it was really that I got there by chance. I started in a sales role. And I just had an opportunity. Someone approached me at a certain point in time and said, hey, we have this partner. No one really wants to manage them. And I asked, what is it about? And they said, well, it's managing an Excel sheet and getting money for it. And I thought to myself, well, that's stupid to say. Why doesn't anyone want to touch this? That's stupid to say no to this. And when I started managing that partner that today is a multi-million-dollar partner for us, back then it was a couple of hundred Ks a year. I realized that there's a lot of potential there. And that's how I started building the ClickTail and then later on the Contentsquare Partner Program. But I'm connecting it to the beginning of my career. In the 12 years of doing reserves in the Army, I actually commanded a unit that what that unit does is very similar to partnerships. It has very specialized teams that joins other teams. So in essence, I've been doing partnerships there, and the move into doing that in business was very, very smooth for me. So I found something I liked as a combination of sales and relationships. And even though I did jump back to sales at a certain point, I never looked back, and partnerships is my real passion.
Man, how interesting is that? Well, it's been so awesome with us working with different clients, especially working with companies out of Israel. It absolutely blew my mind whenever I learned how many startups, how many tech companies come from Israel. Somebody said, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but somebody said there's more startups per capita in Israel than any other country on the planet. And judging just anecdotally from conversations I have, I believe it.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but it makes sense to me.
So Glad you have a background in law. So there's been a few people that I've chatted with, right, that are partnering professionals, leading teams that have a background in law. But it seems that, at least in my career, a lot of what I did is put contracts together, write those contracts, negotiate those contracts. So man, with your background in law, it's like you're cheating.
Well, you can ask David. Till this day, I actually jump on calls to help bridge the gap between legal and partnerships when it's needed. I can't wait for the day that I won't need to do that, but it actually is kind of fun to use both skill sets.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, David, same thing, man. Love to hear about your background and the journey that you've made to get into the partnering role.
Yeah. I think mine is more, I don't know if you call it traditional or non-traditional. And I wish it was as cool as Gilad's, because I never was in the military and got to drive around tanks and stuff. But I have been, and I would say for the most part, it was over 20 years ago when I got my really first role in partnerships. And that was I was working at a division of Oracle, and this was pre-SaaS day, right before the .com days, in a team called the Solutions Network, when Oracle was going through a transformation of being a product company to a solutions company. So it got a huge amount of exposure of the whole partner ecosystem of Oracle back in the day. And from there, I just was bit and really knew that I wanted to be in kind of a little bit more of a partner sales, partner business development, partner role to really help transform the industry. And I was just at a point where I really enjoyed the digital space, and that was starting to become a little bit more dominant. And then, the .com days kind of took off, and the boom and bust, and just kind of stuck with it, both with solution companies and technology companies, but with always an emphasis of like, hey, how can I help these companies build a go-to-market strategy with partners to really help expand the top of the funnel and really build stronger relationships that really help grow and maintain, a customer base for companies that are looking to really just accelerate their scaling. So that's what it kind of manifested into. And yes, in over the many years, I've had the benefit of working both at services companies and the technology companies, both in SaaS and even predating e-commerce companies, both of what is now part of Oracle Commerce, and just had the benefit of seeing many different plays and shapes across the board. But it always remains the same. It's just partnerships, relationships. It's a key component, and for companies who really get it right, they can really help accelerate and create a faster growth to market as it relates to that. And I do, and I will never stop crutching on Gilad for contract association. He's my legal team that I pull into for all of this as well. So
he's never getting off the hook.
No, it's one of the reasons I came back to work for him as well.
That's awesome. Well, David, I'm curious to ask, partnering's still partnering, but technology has just changed so much over the last 2 decades. How has the landscape changed with partnering? I mean, we're seeing statistics come out now. I mean, I think Microsoft has upwards of 400,000 quote unquote partners, between 300 and 400 per day. We see all of these big companies, right? The IBMs, all the way down to the smaller organizations, just talk about how they are increasing their quantity of partnering professionals, how they're doubling down on partnering. It's just more efficient to do this partnering thing. And it seems like as partnering professionals, we finally arrived. It's like, okay, partnering is a real thing. It's not going away. It's proving its value. We're still trying to figure out how to prove its value, but we just feel it. So investments are being made there. But kind of let us jump in your head for a minute. I mean, what have you seen over the last couple of decades, and how's partnering changed from, let's say, the late 90s, early 2000s to what it is today?
I think the biggest change has been it's become very multidimensional within the company, right? So if I look back in the early days of like getting into partnerships roles, it was very one-dimensional for, hey, just, it was very partner sales focused. Drive partner sales, build out a value-added reseller channel, do something that's very kind of, more so that sat under the CRO, and was very, I would call it like one-dimensional. But today, really the companies that are starting to do right, and I think Jonathan Cherokee on our side really understands this and sees the value of this, it's very multidimensional. I mean, we're engaged and incorporated into every aspect of the company as it relates to customer success and to our services organization, as well as support, as well as marketing, as well as having a seat at the table with the executives. And it's a core component for the organization. So prior days and earlier days, it was more kind of, just a sales function and just very one-dimensional. But I think now we're spreading and building in companies that are getting it right, see it very much as a multidimensional. You have to have a seat at the executive table and have to have a mindset from the CEO down to be a great partnering organization, and people who really accept that are starting to see some really good benefits.
Yeah, well said. Love to dig into, what in the world is Contentsquare? Can you share a little bit with us about the company's history? And then what does partnering mean for Contentsquare right now? What does that look like?
So Contentsquare's mission really is to give every digital team the ability to measure the behaviors on the website. So we, in essence, give you visibility that is lacking in online properties to see how your visitors are interacting with your digital channels. So if you were a restaurant owner, you can walk in the morning and you can see if everything is clean, if all the waiters are there, if the cutlery is clean, if the food is good. And you'll be able to tap into all the interactions with them, right? If they do voice a concern or anything, you'll be able to react to that. You'll be able to go and ask them what exactly happened. And in the digital world, you just don't have that. So we record every interaction, and we help aggregate that data and quantify that data in a way that gives context to how people are reacting to your website. So that is everything from error tracking and finding buttons that don't work, finding parts of the website or flows that are just not intuitive, or mistakes that we made, like putting a checkout button in under the fold, under the average screen height. So that's Contentsquare. The company was founded in 2012 by Jonathan Cherky in France as part of his college project. And in 2019, it acquired Clicktail, the company that I came from and David actually worked for in the past. And Clicktail was doing the same thing and actually owning most of the patents of the industry around session replays and heat maps, et cetera. And since the company was acquired and merged into Contentsquare, we never looked back, and we became the definitive leader in experience analytics. We've since then did another 5 acquisitions and raised a lot of money to date, over $800 million, with the 2 last rounds in the last 12 months being almost $700 million in funding. But we just last week acquired another player in the space, Hotjar, that does the same thing that we do, but for the SMB and mid-market. And with that, we actually are now able to provide our service anywhere from an entrepreneur or a neighborhood store owner who doesn't want to pay anything or wants to pay $9.99 to the largest enterprises in the world needing this service to really help increase the money they make online and create better experiences, because anywhere you'll look, you'll see that experience is the new currency. So that in a nutshell is what Contentsquare does.
So kind of tracking these digital experiences, it's mobile, it's web, it's anything digital. Is the capability there to aggregate, to pull that data and then run analytics and share insights based upon that?
Yes, it's any touch point that you have with the website, anything that happened there, whether static or dynamic. It's important to say we don't, everything is anonymized. We don't capture personal identifiable information. We just don't collect that. And we don't really care who you are. We care about the interaction and the experience that you had. And we care about finding similar experiences and quantifying them to really be able to surface problems and things that are working well or working not well in your digital property.
And so, Gilad, from a partnering perspective, how is Contentsquare partnering? I would imagine there's a sales side. There's probably some technology side. There's other pieces and ways that organizations partner. What does partnering look like from Contentsquare's perspective?
So Contentsquare traditionally has been more on the co-sell approach. We do have a resell practice and a pretty good one that we brought over from Clicktail, but because we are growing mostly direct today, it's more co-sell. Although we are developing other channels, we like to look at it in 3 pillars. There's a technology partners world that is integrations and creating new value propositions with our partners. And for us, by the way, in Contentsquare, it's very, very easy. It's been over 2 years, but it's still hard to shake that muscle of calling everything Clicktail. But we help contextualize other companies' data. Or we help power them if they're companies that take action. So as an example, if you're an analytics company or an A/B testing company or a voice of customer company, we will gladly push our data and help contextualize the data that they already captured. So we're very complementary to these players. And if you're a company that does certain actions like the personalization companies, or if you're a BI tool, we can push our data out to your platform to take action and make smarter decisions based on our data. So that is a technology partner practice, and it's pretty straightforward. The other pillar that we have is around the solution partners, and it's less. Contentsquare is a very easy solution to deploy. So historically in the partnerships world, and David can share more about that, and he had the pleasure of working for some companies like that required a lot of setup or a lot of work and hand holding to make sure that you can extract value from the product. The good thing and bad thing about Contentsquare is that it's super easy. The company was built to democratize data. Everything is super easy. Any person in the world, including my almost 90-year-old grandma, can use Contentsquare to get insight from their website. The thing is, it doesn't leave a lot of room for services for partners. So we actually had to tackle that problem and say, hey, how do we make sure there's a win-win here? And the way we actually built it and are building it is that Contentsquare actually makes our partners smarter. And they can provide new services, or they can even provide some they provide today, from management consultancy, site revamps, site audits, and become smarter, be more accurate, and have a faster time to insight while they're leveraging Contentsquare. So we had to think a bit outside the box, but we eventually got there and found a win-win proposition with these partners as well. And the third pillar that I touched on a little bit in the beginning is the indirect part, which we are developing, but again in a slower pace. Where we have distributors and reselling, value-added resellers selling Contentsquare in specific regions. It's a very successful practice, but again, it's not one that we are looking to compete with sales in our core regions. It's in regions where we decide to go indirect. That's where we have these teams who are specialized in
Got
that.
it. David, I'd love for you to just kind of talk to us about strategy in general, like around partnerships. I mean, so many, at least clients that we work with, it seems like the bulk of them are wanting to, shift from primarily direct to become primarily indirect. I'd love for you just to share some of your insights about, how leaders should think about strategy and partnerships and how to construct new programs, or how to think about building a strategy around partnering.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we always are talking about and continue to talk about as an industry and leaders and across in all the different companies to do this. And I think the primary, what the goal of everyone should be thinking about as it relates to the strategy is once you define what that is for the company and how we think about it, you really have to do a lot of internal selling and internal education and really working with the teams, top to bottom, to help them to incorporate them into the mix of the picture, right? So the worst thing anyone can do in our role within any organization is thinking that you can single thread a strategy with any partner or your partner strategy overall if you don't basically get buy-in and commitment and accountability for other people in the organization, direct sales, marketing, services, et cetera. So it's very critical once you set that strategy that you do really get buy-in from all those different people within the organization, and then clearly start to identify and really start to pick off. Every company I've been to, and like everyone speaks of like, hey, here are the 20 to 30 companies that we need to have a partnership with. I remember a funny story in one of the previous companies that I worked for, and I won't say any names, but I can say who the partner was, is that the CEO wanted IBM as a partner so much for the fact that he had someone come in over the weekend and paint the gentleman who was running partnerships office completely blue with the IBM logos all over the walls, just to reiterate that. But, it's great. And, at that time, it's a fairly large company and a funny story. But without the buy-in of, the CEO was bought in, but, really had to work hard in getting buy-in from other people in the organization to make that a very successful relationship. And it takes a lot. So the bigger beast you try to swallow as a partner, it's a lot more work that you have to do, a lot more internal selling, and those will take a longer time. But, for starting out for the companies that are earlier in the space, it's really critical just to define and get a couple quick wins with, no matter what size the technology or solution partner is, start to kind of build that muscle up as you grow and get to a point then you can start expanding to the larger systems integrators, the larger solution providers, and the bigger technology companies that are in the broader ecosystem that you live in.
Love when the way you say that, because we teach and preach so much that partnering really is a culture within an organization, and being able to embrace that. I think especially with companies that start off as purely direct sales, you kind of have that it's us against the world sort of approach, and you kind of build that muscle of how your organization fits in that culture. And then whenever you kind of start to transition and you're doing this partnering thing, it's kind of like, well, who's that group? What does that mean? It's almost like there's initiatives where we're looking to chop off the new arm that we grew. And,
right.
Partnering is, I think, such a culture, and it takes a lot of work, from the executives all the way down to really embrace, to inform, to get people to buy into that approach.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point, and Gilad knows this is very wholeheartedly. Like, we can't sit back and rest and think we've done our job. Like, even if we get complete buy-in from the top down, it's a consistent muscle you have to do day to day to reach out, to build the muscle, to speak with as many people as possibly internally, to get them to really understand and get them to adopt that mindset and that culture as well.
Yeah, it seems that so many of the people that we touch in partnering, I think it's one of the most dynamic roles there are, right? Because we get to touch potentially any and all different groups and departments all across our organizations. And so I think you're totally right. It's communicating up, communicating down, and sideways. It's all the above. So Gilad, and the amount of growth that you guys have seen over the last year or so is just, nothing short of phenomenal. You guys are just really making some aggressive moves. I'd like to talk a little bit about scaling, and just scaling the partnering function itself. How do you manage the growth, within the teams, and maybe even talk to us a little bit about the importance of process and just being really mindful about how you continue to build the team and continue to execute?
Yeah. So when I realized for the first time that we are going to grow and continue to grow in this rate, I started speaking with people from the industry who have done this before. Because honestly, I've never scaled anything to this level. And the one thing they all said, and we know this, right? Partnership is a long game. It's not that you flip a switch today and you get the fruit tomorrow. You need to plant the tree and you'll see the fruit 12 months from now. So one of the best tips I got was build the right infrastructure as if you were already a big company, even if you don't need everything right now. So build these processes, start using these processes, start practicing that muscle, because otherwise in a year from now, when you're going to be triple the team you are today, and you're going to have a target that is 4 times what you have today, you're not going to be able to do it. So one of the first things we did was build the processes around it. And we put, even if we had a team of a manager and 2 people, we build processes that will be sustainable even when we have a manager and 10 people there with team leads. And that's what we're also doing today, by the way. We keep on meeting with HR, meeting with our business partners internally, and building the infrastructure to support the future growth of this team and of the company. The second thing is around technology. And we've adopted a ton of partnership technology, which, by the way, probably deserves its own podcast. The growth in partner technology, partner relationship management platforms, the account mapping platforms, or as they call themselves, the data escrow services, marketplace providers, and the list goes on and on. And we started adopting these and putting in processes and making decisions around what is going to be our center of gravity. For us, by the way, it's Salesforce. So everything goes and flows through Salesforce. Doesn't matter if you don't play with Salesforce, you're out. Whether you're a person or you're a platform, you have to play that game. And we're using that for growth. I will say that the biggest challenge that we have today is less on scaling the team or the partnerships, meaning we know what we need to do there. We are putting in the right processes. We are doing the right things. And we actually have the buy-in from our internal customers, from sales as well, to invest a lot of our time in building the future and not just building the present. I think the biggest challenge we have today is around recruitment and around training and enablement, because we are in a place where, honestly, David does not have time to onboard the people joining his team. because he has a day job and he can't do that once a month. And the second thing is recruiting. If you're listening to this podcast, we're recruiting a lot of people and we're looking for talent, but honestly, there's a shortage of good talent in the partner and specifically partner sales space. And that is a big challenge and something that I deal with personally every day.
Glad that's a great segue into my next question for you. And that is, man, it seems that the pool of partnering professionals was tapped out years ago. And so now it's net new people, right, that are coming into this partnering role. So this is a huge question, a huge challenge, not only for you and your team, but literally across the globe. Well, let me ask you this. What's been your experience? What does your experience teach you of what is a great, approach, psyche, methodology, just kind of a background, philosophies for people that make great partnering professionals?
It's funny that you asked. The first thing I did when I actually got promoted in ClickTail years ago, and they told me, okay, you've done well, build a team, is I spent the whole flight between the States and Israel, about 11 hours, building this Excel sheet calculator wizard that had all these characteristics, and I saw people and actually build the perfect partner manager. And by the time I landed back in Tel Aviv, I knew the calculator so well, I actually never used it. So I can tell you what I was looking for in a partner manager, and today what I'm looking for, because these are two very different things. I was originally looking for people who have sales experience, whether it's partner sales or actual sales, but people who close deals and know how to close deals, because that's something that is very, very hard to teach. And honestly, partnerships is about closing deals. Whether it's a partner or a customer, you're closing a deal. And you need to know how to sell and not just how to, the jump I feel between roles like CSMs or SDRs to partnerships is a lot more difficult than it is from sales to partnerships. It doesn't mean that you can't find people who know how to do that jump and will know how to bridge the gap. But I'm looking for people who are sales professionals, and then people who are, and that's more of a soft skill, people who have relationship skills, people who know how to keep the internal relationship and the external relationship, and that are plug and play easily and very easy to adapt to new environments. That was originally. Today, honestly, I hire talent. Like you said, the pool is so short. And if someone comes to me and says, I'm not from MarTech, I know nothing about MarTech, I've never sold anything, but I look at the person and I was like, okay, this is a talented person and someone we can grow. We will usually take that person and invest in growing that person, honestly, because you can't get 30, 40, 50 good partner sales professionals in the market. If I have to have in the company that number of partner sales people, it will be impossible if I just look for these unicorns who exist maybe somewhere out there.
Yeah, great insights there. Well, David, I'm going to ask you the last question, if you would. I'll have you tackle this one. So, I'm one of those people that I firmly believe we learn so much more from either our challenges or our mistakes that we overcome, as opposed to the things that we just kind of get these windfalls. I'll ask you to reflect back on your career. What's maybe something that a challenge or something that you had to overcome, maybe a mistake where you should have went left, but you went right. What's something that you could share with us, leaning back on your career that we could take with us?
Wow, that's a very loaded question, especially with my boss.
I would actually also like to hear that. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't think that, look, I've been doing this long enough where it's like no one's perfect, right? We've always, you always, even through the course of the year, you make a lot of mistakes. And the biggest thing is like how quickly you recover and acknowledge and just learn from that. And if I looked on, speaking to people that are probably a little bit earlier in their stage and going through this as well, is just no specifics are coming to mind, but believe me, give me like an hour and I can write down a handful of them. But the biggest thing is just what I've learned, the biggest thing really over the course of my career is just open and honesty is like a huge value that just, hey, if you don't know something, speak up. I have kids now, a high schooler and a middle schooler, right? And I'm like, wow, I'm finally realizing all the stuff my parents were teaching me. But even in business, and especially with partnerships, like, it's a blessing and a curse where we come across we're exposed to so much in the business of how everything is made, from the complete, writing code all the way to people solving business problems. We see that whole landscape, and to really understand that from point A to point B is just like there's very few people out there that really have a grasp of all of that entire ecosystem. And there's going to be points and stages when you're going through your career that you won't know certain things, like if solution partners or technology partners are explaining things, and just be honest to take the time and learn more and ask questions. So, you try to avoid as many of the pitfalls that you may fall into, because the more questions and the more understanding the ecosystem, the better. And, if I look back at my career and even thinking forward, it's like, I don't, you hate to coin the phrase because it's like, I feel like I'm talking to a bunch of high schoolers and middle schoolers. It's like, there's no stupid questions. So even if you don't know, if you hear something, chime in, ask, pull people to the side, because we are, as I like to say it, it's like we are somewhat the Navy SEALs of the sales organization and the software organization in the partnership world. It's like when we're doing our job right, no one knows that we came in and did the job for the most part, and everyone else may be a high-fiving, and you got to be okay with that. But knowing everything to keep yourself and the team moving forward and building the company is just, you just got to be comfortable with that role.
Yeah. And David, I couldn't agree more. And Mark, just to add on that, and it is a bit of cliche, but I think my biggest successes in my career so far came right after a big failure. And I learned from these failures more than I learned from the success. So every time I failed, whether it's here right now in this role or in previous roles, I use that as a learning experience to jump and do a lot better. And like David said, everyone remembers the failures, but no one remembers when you succeed. And I actually think that's a positive thing, that the constant reminder that we want to be better and that we are striving to be better and to get bigger achievements.
Yeah, those are great words of wisdom. I'm a firm believer that if you're not failing periodically, you're not trying, because you're just playing it too safe. And I echo that. I absolutely have learned a lot more from my failures than I have the successes. But that's really when we have a chance to, push the status quo, to make these paradigm shifts, to mix it up and change it up. And if you're not willing to take the risk of failing, I think you're just playing too conservative. And overall, it is more that innovative, aggressive approach to try things that pushes us to new heights. So yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. Well, Gilad, David, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about your guys' background, Contentsquare, man, the amazing growth that you guys are seeing now, and look forward to continue to track you guys and report on your success.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Partnernomics Podcast is brought to you by Partnernomics. Learn how to leverage the power of partnership. To listen to more episodes of Partnernomics Podcast, visit partnernomics.com.